If we want to look at the interactions between our thoughts and our language, and from there how we understand, use and abuse language, there are a number of semantic properties that are worth giving some extra time. What unites these are that they are all involve how we connect different word concepts in our minds, and this makes them even more fluid and ephemeral than most other more concrete words. These words are the synonyms, the antonyms, the homonyms, and its twin brother, the polyseme. These are all very basic, but they bear repeating since they are central in how we frame and process most everyday experiences, and thus how we see reality. This is omnibus rebus, and I can be a synonym of me. A synonym is defined by Merriam-Webster's dictionary as one of two or more words or expressions in a given language that have the same or nearly the same meaning in some or all senses. Now, it's easy to forget these qualifiers, and that is a very, very dumb thing to do, or rather problematic. A synonym is only a synonym in a specific context and usage, and this limitation can cause a lot of confusion, since the way our mental lexicon is developed does not make this type of distinction automatically. A synonym is never correct in all situations. They are almost always decidedly context dependent. This makes synonyms one of these very fluid properties, and can connect vastly separated word concepts in our lexicon. A good way to see this is with the type of word association games that most people probably have played in their youth, where you start with a word and you basically try to see how far from the original word you can come by associations, or how you sometimes, another good example is how you try, sometimes just for fun, try to deliberately misunderstand somebody by taking a word apart and misrepresenting it when somebody says something. This is also often abused in many types of debates and in politics to confuse issues and mislead people. We can note that one of the first more important things about a synonym is that it's not bidirectional. You generally cannot go back to the original words once a synonym has been made and you've continued on in the dialogue. And also that you cannot go more than one degree of separation. You cannot take the synonym of a synonym of a synonym, for the reasons I mentioned in that about word games. All words can be connected in some way, and if you go far enough, you can go anywhere from anywhere. This we can see in many types of fallacious thinking, because all the fallacies connected to division, composition, associations and generalization are influenced or related to the properties of synonyms. Antonyms, as compared to synonyms, are words that can only be understood in relation to an opposite or an opposing or complementary property. This includes gradable properties such as most adjectives, big, bigger, small, smaller, but also strict complementary pairs like teacher implies student and such, similar. Now, most of the antonyms we come into contact with are adjectives, and has their origin in these, but have in some way transcended into the realm of pure abstract. But regardless of what type of antonyms we have, we must remember that when we use them, we automatically imply the existence of its complementary, and that it does not apply to the thing we are talking about. If we say that somebody is tall, we also automatically have said that they are not short. And similar. And this automatic property has certain implications for our everyday life, and that is that it creates the framing of our descriptions. If we, depending on how we start in our choice of these words, it influences how we perceive the surrounding. They are, especially if this is especially in retellings, when we don't have the original physical situation or object near. This means that they are utterly useless, generally speaking, in a scientific context, because they mean so different things for different people in different situations, whilst using the same words in a descriptive, in a graded way. But another problem is that those words that have transcended, and a good example of these are good and evil and abstract and concrete, because these words we often use and totally forget the interaction with the complementary word. You cannot have good without evil. You cannot define it in human language and human thought. You cannot have an absolute concrete in any way that we interact with, because any human interaction also involves an abstraction, and the opposite. It goes so far as the word abstract being defined as not concrete, and the other way around. So when you say that something is concrete, that's useless. But saying something is more concrete than something specific other is not. And the same goes for ideas as good and evil. You cannot define the property of good or the property of evil independently. And many people completely forget this. Our final type of semantic property are the homonym. And it's, as I said, this polyseme. Now, in pure linguistic terms, these are very distinct, but in practical terms, I will lump them together. Now, a homonym is homonyms are words that have exactly the same sound but mean distinctly different things. The simplest and classic example is that you can hit a bat with a bat, for instance, or you can desert your dessert. In these word cases, the words have completely different origin, as I said, and you have to have the context to know what somebody means if you just use one. That you hit a bat can as easy mean that you hit a small flying mammal as a wood or metal club used in games. Without a context, it is not possible to actually know which is meant. The polyseme, on the other hand, has basically the same property, but the critical difference is that the polyseme is a single word whose meaning has branched out and has more than one distinct meaning. A good example that often shows up in YouTube debates are the concept of a theory. Because the word theory has at least three distinct semantic meanings, and and they cannot be interchanged between each other. So the sum of this is that the homonyms are the words most likely to cause unintended misunderstandings or lock people into diametrically opposite views by virtue of not accepting that just because you're using the same sounds does not mean you mean the same thing. And a final note of that is also that a theory is not always synonym with itself.